Now, part of every TED event is something called the TED Wish. And the TED Wish isn't to, solicit any funds or anything like that. The TED Wish is for you to hear about something and maybe start to think about some ideas for that particular thing, or how you might be able to help if it was something that grabbed you. But it's just to hear about something that we found pretty inspiring, that we thought you might find kind of inspiring as well. And I'm going to invite up Izzy Greenberg. She is part of an organization called One Laptop Per Child. And Izzy is going to just take a couple of minutes and just tell you a bit about what One Laptop Per Child is all about. So Izzy Greenberg, the floor is yours.
Hold on. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit wired up here. I'm just going to put this out, and I can pass this around. I didn't turn it on because I don't think you'll listen to me if I do. Here. These are the One Laptop Per Child laptops, and you could see how that sort of opened up. I'll just, pass it around a little while I'm talking. So my name's Izzy Greenberg. I'm the director of the North End Action Team. We're based out of Middletown, Connecticut, and we do grassroots community organizing and neighborhood revitalization work in the north end of Middletown. Let's see, these are some of, I wanted to put a lot of pictures because I think that really tells a better story than sort of having to read a lot of PowerPoints. But just to give you a background on what our agency does is we're focused on leadership development for our neighborhood. It's a very low income neighborhood. It has the highest percentage of people of color in the city, and that's only remarkable because we believe that that has really led to a policy of disenfranchisement for that neighborhood, not that that statistic should be self-determining. So that's something that is very important to us, is that I think that race and class and poverty have really determined the outcome for this neighborhood up until this point, at least in the last 50 years. And that's a dynamic that we want to shift. We believe this neighborhood can be self-determining, and that the people living there, regardless of race, which has actually gotten incredibly muddy, but very precisely poverty and income, that they can really expand their boundaries. And so we really are working, and I sort of highlighted things that I want you to focus on. You don't have to read any of this, but it's really about Indigenous leadership. It's about focusing on the people who are living in this neighborhood and helping them to know and understand and grow to actually make decisions for their neighborhood that are important. So that's our this is sort of just a slide to show you the map of our neighborhood. People are probably familiar with Route 66, which bisects our downtown. This is Route 9, where I guess some of you got stuck in traffic in Middletown this morning. But that's our whole neighborhood. It's really small. It's about a square mile. We have 4,200 people living there, one elementary school that serves the whole neighborhood. And when we began to look at the neighborhood, actually our group started because of a tragic death of a 16-year-old boy in 1996. And that was really the spark that galvanized the neighborhood to say, you know what, this is totally unacceptable. We need to make some decisions for our neighborhood. Things can't keep happening to us. And that was when my agency formed. And at the beginning, we really focused mostly upon improving affordable housing, working with or against, depending on your perspective, to improve conditions of blight, code enforcement, community policing. And so after some of those things had been met, and actually Jeff said that he had gone by one of our housing redevelopment areas this morning when he was stuck in that traffic. And so there's some really incredible progress that's been made in this neighborhood. And this housing has been redeveloped so that people can afford to live in this neighborhood in safe, clean conditions and create a healthy neighborhood for themselves. But once we sort of got past that, we said, well, what are the other factors that are making this neighborhood a neighborhood where families aren't staying, that it's not a neighborhood of choice? And what we wanted was for not to change the income levels or the racial demographic makeup. We want to change the people's interpretation of the neighborhood. We want people who live there to say, I want to live here for a reason. We want people from the outside to say, oh, that looks like a desirable neighborhood. I'd like to live there too. And the thing that we saw that was the next biggest factor was that our elementary school, in a fairly affluent Middletown, has enough money. The schools are good enough. And the elementary school, McDonough, was the lowest of the low, I mean, in the entire state. And our kids were doing terribly. And when you asked the district, why is this school failing when all the other schools are doing just fine, they said, well, generational poverty, low expectations of the students from their families. You know, it's the people's fault. It's really their fault that their kids aren't learning. And our neighborhood, our residents, our parents said, that's absurd. We know our kids can learn. You're not giving them the right tools. You're not putting the right resources in. And so in the last 5 years, through a lot of pushing, we've been able to make changes in the administration. There's a new principal. They're working with our community, not against it. They're including parents. And we've made a lot of policy changes and also community changes. So I know this, the laptop that's going around is sort of one example of one of the projects that we started in this neighborhood school. As you can see, the one statistic here that I think is important is that a great number of the families in our neighborhood, families of 4, make less than $13,500 for a year. Now, I mean, there's not a lot of computers in these homes. If they have computers, they probably don't have internet access. And so even if the kids are achieving in the schools, they aren't bringing that stuff home necessarily. Their parents may not be able to enforce that. Their parents may not have the skills to be able to do that on their own. And so with this, let's see, I think that this is sort of too much to read, but what's important about this project is that what we've been able to do is give laptops to these kids where they're doing some learning in school, but more importantly, they're bringing these home. And so they're working with maybe their little sister or brother, their older sister and brother. Maybe they're teaching their parent. Maybe they have a parent who didn't graduate high school, maybe didn't get through middle school, and is a little bit afraid to ask for help. But when the kid goes to sleep, this laptop's now in the home, and that parent can use it too. And maybe they're learning from their child, and it's totally changing the dynamic within a household and how that household values education. So there's so many important things that we've seen, you know. So we have students that are learning to use them in school, bringing them home. I think more importantly, and I'm just going to sort of go quickly through these. I don't know if how much. Oh, that's a lot of time actually. That's not right, is it? I said, okay. So, but what's more important is that you're not learning Microsoft Word. You're not learning how to do PowerPoint. As you can see, it's very important. What the students are actually learning is how a computer thinks and how you should think about a computer. These laptops were actually developed to be used primarily in third world countries where there's no electricity. I mean, in much more impoverished communities than the one that I work in. But the principles are sort of the same. What they wanted these students to be able to do, you know, in countries in Africa and in Haiti and all over the world was to understand how a computer thinks. So that even if the software they're learning right now becomes outdated by the time they, you know, go into the workforce, they understand, what does a computer do? How does it think? How can I program it? And so if you're learning that type of knowledge, you can take that type of learning with you no matter what. And you're not stuck saying, well, you know, I knew, I don't know, what was it, Word Perfect? I knew Word Perfect, and now I don't know Word, you know, so I guess I can't get that job. And that's not what's happening with this. We didn't want it to just be, you're giving a kid a computer, good luck, hope you can learn some video games. It's, how are you learning something sort of at your core that will prepare you to compete with your upper and middle class peers who have had a whole range of learning opportunities that have taught them how to think. One of the things that we see, you know, this is actually a teacher in the school. We've used these not only in this elementary school, but also in some after-school programs with a few other groups of kids. And, no, that's still not right. And what we found is that the students are really empowered to try new things. They can do music on there. There's a whole range of possibilities. But I think most importantly is not that actual learning. It's, what is this program bringing to the whole community? It's empowering this community to think about learning and education in a new way. It's empowering students and their parents to interact in new ways. And I'm thinking about, you know, Jeff said we need to dollarize everything. And to me, a program like this, the dollar amounts are infinite. Because if these students are able, now that actually, so the sort of multiplier effect is that with programs like this elementary school is now one of the top schools in the state in its category, which is schools with 80% or more free and reduced lunch. But that's an incredible feat, because we were actually lowest out of about 50 5 years ago. And we're in the top 2 now. And we're one of the best schools in the district. Our achievement gains are incredible. We're award-winning in 5 years. And it's programs like this. It's community involvement. It's a whole range of things. And now these students they're not graduating from 5th grade and going into the absolute remedial classes in 6th grade and then probably not graduating. they're leaving this school in 5th grade going into advanced classes. And that is such a difference in how many of those students are now going to graduate through high school, how many are going to go to college, get decent jobs, not $13,000 for a year, and bring that money back to their community. This neighborhood doesn't have to be an impoverished neighborhood, but even if it continues to be a poor neighborhood, there's skills there, and we're trying to change the way that this community sees itself and determines its own outcome. I mean, I think back to what Dottie said too, you know, if you have these things you're internalizing, they become true. And what the students in our neighborhood are hearing is that you live in the wrong neighborhood. The people in your neighborhood, low expectations of you from your family. You have generational poverty. It's not going to happen for you. And that's what we want to change, because they are internalizing that. And that has been the pattern of self-determination for these students for the last 50 years, where we don't have high graduation rates. We don't have high, attrition into college and beyond. And that dynamic has really shifted, even in the last 10 years. And so that's what we're trying to do, is create programs like this one that aren't just teaching skills-based, things where they can take it and, okay, great, we know how to use a computer. But through this, through a whole range of other programs we have, really trying to change the mindset of the neighborhood and the mindset of the outside world about this neighborhood, which is just as important, because it doesn't matter if we know how well we're doing. If the whole rest of the world still sees us as that crummy neighborhood, then it still is that crummy neighborhood, and that still continues to be internalized. So, I just show you a few more pictures, but I think is that probably about the time? I'll just keep this on here. I think, if you guys are thinking about what you can do with a program like this, how can you be involved? I think that the greatest barrier, of course, to a group like ours is always money. I mean, I'll just be real with you. We are a small community group, and we work in a low-income neighborhood that's tiny. And so what is the incentive for a large company to work with a group like ours? There isn't really one. You'd rather work in a New Haven or a Hartford, where the geography is so much bigger, the numbers are so much bigger. But think about the difference you can make in a small neighborhood where we're dealing with an elementary school of 220 kids. We're not trying to tackle 20,000 students. The impacts we've seen in the last 5 years has been tremendous, and that's actually possible in a short amount of time in a neighborhood like ours. And so the 4,200 people living here will have a totally different history going forward than the people who lived here 20 years ago. So, I encourage you to go to our website. It's meetmiddletown.org, and we can always use incredible volunteers, people with skills. We do things. We have a hiking club that's hiking the Appalachian Trail, goes to different parts of the region to hike with some of the kids from our neighborhood. We do things from gardening, whatever you're interested in. We could definitely use tech support with some of the computers. Yeah. They don't. We have about 90 right now, and we basically cycle. Yeah, we cycle through. We can't give one to every student, and actually it's a little hard to determine, depending on the skills of the teachers too, is it more appropriate for kindergarten? Depending on your perspective, it's perfect for kindergarten because they're really, really open to it. But it's harder for the teachers to sort of be able to deal with that. So part of what we could also use are talented people who want to spend some time with a group of kids, sitting there and working with them and figuring it out with them, and not teaching them how, because that's one of the things we've come up against. Is a lot of the volunteers say, like, I can't use that thing. I have no idea what it's for. My hands are too big. The point isn't that you know how to do it and you're teaching them. You're just sort of like guiding them through the learning process. And that's really what we're doing in all of our programs and activities. So I hope, does anyone have questions for him? You can't actually buy them because they're really intended to be bought in bulk, like 10,000 at a time. They occasionally will do a give one, get one program where someone like you could buy basically 2 for $500. One goes overseas, and then you get one. And then if you choose to, you donate it to a group like ours, or you keep it for your family or a friend. And so we really rely on donations, which is also one of the limiting factors of this program, is that we've got 90 computers right now, and we can't buy more, really, unless I go on eBay or something. But they're not expensive. And the tech support part is pretty easy to do because they're really intended to be able to be fixed by a kid. So with small hands and no electricity.